Well, welcome to the 700 Club. For today's top stories, let's go over to the CBN News Desk.
Gordon, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said today his country will never negotiate its weapons program. The statement comes a day after the North test-launched its first intercontinental ballistic missile, and as the United Nations takes up the North's latest action. Mark Martin has the story.
The United States, Japan, and South Korea requested that the United Nations Security Council meet. The council is scheduled to hold an emergency session this afternoon. The U.S. said the North Korea launch was indeed an intercontinental ballistic missile, one that experts say might be able to reach Alaska. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson labeled it a new escalation of the threat to the U.S. President Donald Trump's national security advisor made it clear that the U.S. will not allow North Korea to threaten America with nuclear weapons.
We can't repeat the same approach, failed approach of the past. The president has directed us to not do that and to prepare a range of options, including a military option, which nobody wants to take.
Kim Jong-un and his regime celebrated the launch of the missile, which traveled 1,700 miles high and landed in the water 577 miles to the east in the Sea of Japan. North Korea's military referred to the launch as the final step in a confident and powerful nuclear state that can strike anywhere on Earth. The threat escalation came days after Trump expressed concern about a nuclear warhead on that type of missile.
The era of strategic patience with the North Korean regime has failed. Many years, and it's failed. And frankly, that patience is over.
Following the North Korean missile launch, the U.S. and South Korean soldiers fired deep strike precision missiles Tuesday, showing that the two countries are committed to working together. The Trump administration is considering its options, including diplomatic and military moves, as North Korea promises it won't give up developing its nuclear weapons and missile programs. Mark Martin, CBN News.
President Trump is headed back to Europe for the upcoming G20 summit in Germany at the end of this week. His first stop will be in Poland, where he's set to receive a friendly welcome. He'll give a speech in Krasinski Square, which is close to the site of the 1944 Warsaw Uprising against the Nazis. Poland's government has emphasized Russia's aggression in Ukraine poses a threat to the whole of Europe. And the issue of dealing with Russia is certainly to come up at the European summit, as President Trump will have his first face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin later this week. Was Russia involved in the attempt to assassinate Pope John Paul II in 1981? Both the Pope and President Reagan survived the attempts on their lives that year. And historian and author Paul Kengor says both felt that surviving those attempts were part of God's plan, a plan to bring down the evil atheistic Soviet Union. Eric Rosales spoke with Kengor, who reveals that and much more in his latest book.
In the spring of 1981, President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II took bullets from would-be assassins just 6 weeks apart. Criminal acts which both men saw as evil forces.
Reagan, in that first meeting at the Vatican, even said to John Paul II, look how the evil forces were put in our way. Look at what they tried to do. I mean, they saw this as a historical, spiritual battle against the forces of darkness, as Reagan called it.
Forces of darkness, which could not destroy the good they were doing.
They both said to one another, this Protestant president and obviously Catholic Pope, they said to one another that they believed that God had spared their lives because they should have bled to death. They both should have died.
Kengor says both Ronald Reagan and the pontiff believed their lives were spared to take down atheistic Soviet communism. In Kengor's book titled A Pope and a President, Pope John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and the Extraordinary Untold Story of the 20th Century, also reveals the never-before-seen plan by the Soviet Union to assassinate Pope John Paul II.
I learned that Bill Casey at the CIA led a truly super-secret investigation led by two women. Institutional CIA couldn't imagine that Moscow would ever shoot a pope, right? But John Paul II and Bill Casey and Ronald Reagan and Bill Clark, they thought this was an evil empire. They thought, oh yeah, these guys would shoot a pope.
In the end, Kengor says evidence showed a Soviet military intelligence unit carried out the attack in a plan approved by the infamous KGB. Eric Rosales, CBN News.